Joining me now is the chair of the Federal Parliament's Security and Intelligence Committee, Senator James Paterson. Thanks very much for your time. We've seen the human tragedy there in Laura's report, and we've seen these images, horrific images. The broader strategic and security question goes to this land once again potentially becoming a safe haven for terrorists. It's a huge concern.
Kieran, I've got three main concerns about events in Afghanistan over the last few weeks. Firstly, obviously, mostly for the Afghan people. There has been a measure of freedom, particularly for women and girls, and there's a very great risk of that backsliding now, and that is a terrible tragedy. Secondly, I'm very concerned on behalf of Australian veterans and their families who have given so much to this cause, and many are rightly questioning that and feeling very disillusioned by these events. And thirdly, I'm concerned about the national security implications for Australia and our allies, because the lessons of the last 20 years have been that ungoverned spaces, wherever they are in the world, pose a risk to us, to free societies like ours. The violence and extremism that can breed there, that can be trained and developed and equipped there, doesn't stay there. It can leak into the rest of the world. And so we do have real interests in Afghanistan and the region.
President Biden said he stands squarely behind his decision that after 20 years, he's learnt the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw US forces. As horrific as the images are of people clinging to planes and the tragedy that's unfolding for Afghan women as well, the point that he makes is it does have a logical basis to it, doesn't it? I mean, the US has been dragged into the Middle East, dragged into Afghanistan for a long, long time, when really the argument would be, and has been made by many strategic thinkers, that the real challenge is elsewhere.
Yeah, the United States has made an almost immeasurable sacrifice in Afghanistan. Australia lost 41 lives of our own in Afghanistan, but Americans obviously lost many more than that. And the American public's war weariness for the Middle East is completely understandable, and also is their desire to pivot and refocus to other areas of the world. In fact, we welcome their renewed focus and attention on the Indo-Pacific. It is our backyard. It is the most important strategic area for our ongoing interests, and we welcome that attention. But I do say that all of us are going to have an ongoing interest in the stability and peace of the Middle East. If it does descend, as it has in the past, as it did in the 90s, it will have consequences for us.
Yeah, the trauma continues for that poor country and its poor people. There's no doubt about that. Now, closer to home, Mike Burgess, the ASIO Director General of Security, in the Nine media recently says that 50% of ASIO's work now is focusing on neo-Nazis. I interviewed him just a couple of months ago. He was saying it was 40% of their work. That's quite an escalation in just a few months.
That's right, Kieran. Nick McKenzie's reporting has certainly brought to public consciousness these issues, but ASIO and their law enforcement partners have been tracking these issues for a long time. As Mike Burgess has publicly said, it's now 50% of their priority counter-terrorism workload. Not that long ago it was 40%, and not that long ago before that it was even less. It's no question that these ideologically motivated extremists, which includes nationalist and racist ideologies, has been the fastest growing area of concern for ASIO in terms of that domestic terror threat. The good news is, though, that they've had very good coverage of groups like the National Socialists Network for quite some time. And so while we might all be learning about this in the public from media reporting, rest assured our law enforcement agencies and our security intelligence agencies are well across this.
And these racists actually worship, as we can see from these images, Adolf Hitler. It's bizarre.
Yeah, quite literally. These are unashamed, unreformed neo-Nazis, and they are propagating a very violent and very dangerous ideology. And it is a real challenge for free societies. It's not just an Australian challenge. This is a phenomenon we're seeing across Europe and the United States as well. And unfortunately, it appears to have accelerated in the COVID-19 pandemic, perhaps because people are spending more time at home, more time isolated, more time online. And the normal disruptive patterns of daily life, like going to work, socialising in the community, and meeting with family and friends, is not happening in the same way it would have previously diverted people away from this path.
Is there a sort of character or person or background where a typical neo-Nazi emerges? It's hard to fathom, really.
Yeah, Mike Burgess has said that in Australia, the evidence suggests that it's a young, it's male, it's white, it's often quite well educated, and groups like the National Socialist Network.
So middle class, essentially.
Very, very much middle class. And some of these groups have quite a sophisticated understanding of the law, and they know how to stay just below the thresholds for things like terrorist listing to avoid the consequences that come from that. So it does pose a new challenge for our agencies to respond to.
Christina Keneally says that Australia is behind its allies in recognising the terror threat posed by right-wing extremism. She wants more groups like this neo-Nazi organisation to be prescribed as terror organisations. Why don't our authorities do that?
When they meet the legal definition, when they meet the legal test, they have been listed. One was already listed earlier this year, the Sonnenkrieg Division, and that's a very welcome thing. And any other organisation which falls afoul of this legal test of a terrorist organisation will as well.
But do you think there's more scope there? Is Christina Keneally right? Do our approaches need to change to adapt to this sort of group?
Well, one thing that the committee is considering in a current inquiry into these issues is whether the 9/11 framework for terrorist listings is appropriate for this new challenge. Should it be amended to make it easier to list these organisations, or is there another category of organisations that would be more appropriate? I mean, we should recognise that these groups are not Al-Qaeda, they are not ISIL, they are different and they pose a different challenge, a very serious menace to our society, but they haven't fit the current legal definition well, so we're looking at that.
James Paterson, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you.